Summarising information will be one of the most important things that you ever learn to do, especially if you're a management consultant. Sometimes trying to create a summary can be really hard because you're in the weeds of the detail and you can't really see the wood for the trees. But as a consultant, you'll need to summarise all the time at work, at the start and end of every presentation, in any update to senior clients, in communications or meetings with key client stakeholders, in providing an update to your manager or to your team. Even when you get home, you'll have to learn to efficiently summarise your day so that you don't have to relive it with your friend, partner, or family. You will not have the time to take everyone through all the detail all the time, nor will people want you to do that. So summarising is key, and I'm going to walk you through how to do it in this video. Welcome back, by the way. I'm Charlie, a consulting director and remote business owner. And my Consultant Explorer channel is to help you be so successful in the early years of your management consulting career that you are set up for total freedom to do whatever you want to in life. And that includes being able to use summarisation to your advantage, whether you need to nurture support from your seniors, or bring your clients on a journey with you, or maintain the attention of an audience that you're presenting to. Each of those scenarios is an opportunity to shine if you know how to summarise. We'll start by walking through how to summarise in a meeting, and then we'll move on to summarising written information or project information. And you'll see that there are some fundamentals to summarising that apply to any summarisation scenario. And we'll end by running through those as key takeaways. So let's talk first about how to summarise a meeting. Summarising activity concludes at the end of a meeting, but really it starts before the meeting starts. You will produce a better summary if you're properly prepared in advance of the meeting. That preparation should involve a couple of key things. The first is being clear on the objective of the meeting. Why has this meeting been put in the diary, and what's it intended to achieve? What's the implication of achieving its objective, and what or who is dependent on that objective? Having that context will help you pick out the important things once you're in the meeting. The second thing that you should prepare is knowledge of who will attend the meeting, what they're going to bring to the meeting, and what they're wanting to take away from that meeting. Knowing this will give you the context as to why people are saying what they're saying in the meeting, and will also help you identify what they mean if what they said isn't 100% clear. So if you've done the right preparation, at the point that you enter the meeting, you understand both the objective of the meeting and who is critical to achieving that objective. This makes the next bit easier. The number one thing that you now need to keep your eye on is progress towards the objective. When you summarise this meeting, your summary is going to centre around that objective. Conversation might veer off course occasionally, but you'll be able to determine whether those parts of the conversation are important or not because you'll know the objective of the meeting. The information that should make it into your summary comes in 4 categories: decisions, actions, risks, and dependencies. If the room comes to a decision, make a note of it. If there is an agreement or an ask that someone takes something forward outside of the meeting room, they've been assigned an action, so make a note of that too. If anyone raises something that might get in the way of achieving any key decision, goal, or action, then it's a risk, and you should make a note of it. And similarly, if anything is raised that is a prerequisite to achieving any key goal, then it should be noted as a dependency. Once you have all of that information, you can write a neat and ordered bullet list, and you can introduce that bullet list with a couple of sentences that sum up the progress that was made in the meeting, and any issues in making it. This sort of summary is really useful later on, when people have either forgotten what was agreed, or you need to chase someone to move forward on an action that they were assigned, or your team is having trouble because a risk hasn't been mitigated. If you've written down and circulated evidence of the meeting, then it becomes a great audit trail, or in other words, great proof. Now that all works for a normal, well-run meeting, but all too often meetings don't run that smoothly. And if that's the case, then when it comes to your summary, you can treat it like this. Wherever the meeting has veered off course, you can treat it as a new meeting objective with its own decisions, actions, risks, and dependencies. And in your summary, have a separate bullet list for that objective. Next, let's consider how to summarise written information or project information. Maybe you're doing some research on something online, or maybe you need to write a summary slide at the start or end of a presentation. Either way, you have a ton of information and you need to condense it down into something that makes sense to people who don't know all the detail. And more often than not, people who don't actually want to know all the detail. The number one thing that you have to do when summarising information like this is start with the big picture. You have to essentially tell your audience what scope you're about to talk about, so that they know the boundaries of the information that you're about to relay and the context within which anything that you say sits. If you don't do this, then information that you give your audience may be misinterpreted, misunderstood, or it might just feel irrelevant. Starting with the big picture essentially creates your why. Why does the information you're going to give matter? Why should the audience pay attention? Why is it all important? One way to do this is to frame your summary with a question that you're going to answer. Another is to explain the problem statement, pains a business is experiencing, or a problem that the business needs to solve. Whether it's a question or a problem statement, it sets the context and significance of what you're about to say. Now that you've laid out the scope of what you're going to talk about, you can talk about it. You've covered the why. Now you need to cover the what and the how in that order. State which whats you're going to cover before you get started. Then for each what you cover, explain where within your scope or context it sits before you drill into any information about it. That information can be more what information, and it can include any how information too. And once you've covered all the relevant information, come back up to the big picture level and remind your audience where within that scope, that what sat, where within that picture it sits in relation to your next what. So it might go something like this. Number 1, your big picture. This presentation covers the results of our research into why Company X is seeing declining revenue and profitability on products A, B, and C. Number 2, introducing your whats. We'll cover our understanding of the problem, our research approach, our research findings, and our recommendations based on the findings. Number 3, explaining your first what. We'll start by recapping our understanding of the problem statement. Your first what. We understand that products A, B, and C are demonstrating decreasing revenue per unit without any decrease in cost per unit. Moving to your next what, with reference to the big picture. Now that we're aligned around the problem statement and objective, we'll move to explaining how we've gathered insight into the problem. Your second what. We conducted interviews and looked through online stats for similar products in the market. Moving to your next what, with reference to the big picture. So we're clear on the problem statement and we know how we gathered insight about what's causing it. So let's cover what that insight is. Your third what. Although products A, B, and C are historically some of your highest profit generating products, the production of these products has become so costly that recent budget cuts have affected the usability of the products. We estimate the real production cost per unit to be £100 to maintain the usability of the product. Your current production cost per unit has stayed flat at 80. The increased cost is driven by increasing third-party storage and warehousing costs. Competitor products in the market have not reduced in usability since the increase in warehousing costs, so their profitability has not been impacted in the same way. Moving to your next what, with reference back to the big picture. So now we know what is causing the problem. Let's turn to how we might be able to fix it. Your fourth what. Based on our findings, we propose 2 things. The first is creating XYZ efficiencies within the product department that enable the appropriate improvements to the product whilst balancing a tighter budget. The second is renegotiating your data warehousing and storage contracts to mitigate the impact of increasing costs. So that example shows us how what might be weeks, if not months of work can be reduced into just the most important parts of the story in a simple summary. The audience is orientated from the start. They know what they're looking for in the information you give. They know what's important. Then they know where they're at any point in your presentation. The information that you present is credible because you explain your approach and you give relevant data points. You have the space to dive into detail where you need, but you also maintain everyone's attention throughout by not overloading with information that isn't important to your purpose. The only thing left for you to do is present any key takeaways. Given that this summary in particular has taken chronological story format, that is an essential. Your recommendations effectively are the takeaways. Takeaways are more important when your summary presents information which doesn't really follow a hierarchy in the same way. However, in this example, you might want to conclude with these takeaways. Number 1, your products, A, B, and C, are both declining in revenue and increasing in cost, which both impact profitability. Number 2, competitor products have not seen a decline in volume of units sold, and their revenue has stayed consistent, meaning that this is not a general market trend. Number 3, you have 2 opportunities to reduce and reinvest your costs. which will in turn mean that you can improve products A, B, and C. Number 4, by making these 2 changes, your revenue will return to where it should be for these products. So that's how you summarize a bunch of written or project information into something easily consumable for an audience. You'll have noticed that there are some consistencies with the summarization approach for meetings too, and they are: always start by defining the scope or boundaries of the context that you're working within. In a meeting, that's the meeting's objective, whereas in a presentation, this is the research question or problem statement. Always follow this chronology. Start with why, move to what, and then if relevant, move to how. The why gives your audience a hook so that they know what to look out for. The what is the meat of the information, and the how brings it to life if you need to. If you're going to speak to a specific subset of the scope, then explain where within that big picture it sits. And once you've finished talking about it, tell your audience what you've just covered and that you're moving to something else now. Those are the 3 key takeaways for summarization, so make a note of them. And let me know in the comments if you're going to go try these. In the meantime, thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a great day, and I wish you all the best with your exploring.